Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this learning experience brought to you by Dynatrace. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. Before we dive into our program, I do have just a couple of extra housekeeping notes to review with you. First off, we are recording our session. So if you miss any of our conversation, if you'd like to watch again later, or of course, if you'd like to share this with the rest of your team, we will be sending you an email with a link to access the recording on demand. If you'd like to get involved, there are a couple of ways to do so. The first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So when you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you're joining from today. If you have specific questions, we do want you to submit those questions to the Q&A tab on the right side of that chat section. We do have some time set aside at the end to discuss your questions, so please do send those in, and we're going to do our best to address as many as we can. If you jump over to that handout section, you'll see there are a couple of resources there for you, so feel free to grab those while you're here spending time with us. And we will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So thank you in advance for your chats, for your questions. And of course, we would really appreciate if you filled out our post-webinar survey. It's currently in the handouts, but we'll post the link toward the end of the program as well. So diving into our topic today, we are securing cloud native workloads, a Dynatrace approach to intelligent AWS security. I'm joined today by Susan St. Clair, Principal Solution Architect at Dynatrace. And I'm also joined by Mark Lucier, Solution Architect at AWS. So Susan and Mark, thank you both so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. Susan, would you like to open us up?
I would, and very excited to be here and be presenting with my colleague Mark over at AWS. Very much looking forward to an amazing discussion around how we can really get to this idea of securing cloud native workloads and how we can help do that in a smart way with AWS. But before we get going, just very quickly, Mark, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit so everyone knows who you are?
Definitely. So my name is Mark Lucier. I'm based out of Boston. I'm supporting our enterprise customers with profiling, security, and observability tools. During my free time, I like our chicken, dogs, and cats at home.
I feel like that's an intro to a joke. Thank you. And my name is Susan. I am, as Cody mentioned, Principal Solution Architect or Engineer over here at Dynatrace, focusing specifically on our security solutions within Dynatrace, background in all of the AppSec tools that you can probably think of out in the market today. So again, very excited to be here. What we'll be discussing today, just kind of to give you a nice overview, certainly, why are we talking about this today? What's making the case for, how cloud native application security is different or maybe has some unique challenges around, making sure that our workloads are secure in an AWS environment. What does that mean in terms of, a well-structured application? I always like to start with the ideal. This is what we're aiming for. Some of the challenges and some of the considerations that, are relevant as we migrate to the cloud, as we re-architect things to take advantage of, deploying applications in AWS. Then, we'll kind of talk around that modernization journey, some of the unique challenges, from a security point of view, how we can address some of those challenges. And then, as we mentioned, go into Q&A. So I know Mark and I wanted to make sure that we had time to discuss and answer any questions as they come up. So a little bit about Dynatrace for those of you who maybe aren't super familiar with us. I promise this is not going to be, an in-depth, all things Dynatrace, but when we talk about Dynatrace, it is an observability and security platform So everything is very tightly integrated, including the security capability, both from a detection, remediation, analytics, point of view. So everything that we see on the observability side, which actually Mark would have some good insights there as well, we are able to then leverage that through our security solution. I always say that, Dynatrace's approach to security is really security through observability. We're just using that, data for security use cases. In terms of kind of our solution specifically, again, just to kind of set the stage as we kind of move into securing cloud native workloads, we really are all about the runtime, whether we're talking about, AWS cloud native workloads as we are here today, or maybe some of the other deployment options that our customers have. So we're really focused on that runtime. And through that runtime, really we're able to use that observability data to help us prioritize, understand kind of what's important. Also to get kind of that end-to-end view, speaking with customers. Down here in Brazil, specifically this week, that's a real challenge when we move to the cloud and when we're dealing with, API gateways and microservices and Lambda functions. And then, of course, we still have the front end, however we're accessing these applications, but really just understanding, even at first, how everything stitches together. So, being able to provide that full stack analysis, whether we're talking about security or observability, and then using that to really drive on the security side, as accurate as possible results, right? The ultra solid, and also making sure that, they're not super noisy and they're actionable. So again, everything very focused on that runtime environment. And then what that allows us to do is actually, as we all know, those of us in the security space, there's a lot of tools out there. They all kind of have their different points of view, and cutting through the noise or kind of trying to understand of, here's my hundreds, thousands, whatever vulnerabilities, which ones do I actually need to pay attention to? So, which are the ones that are actually potentially exposing me to some sort of exploitation, right? So again, we use our observability platform through this, end-to-end view of the world to be able to identify that. So what we're looking at here kind of went from the pretty box, here's all the, colored, boxes, the yellow and the red, into this is something called in Dynatrace a Smartscape topology. It's just an automated topology map of here's how everything kind of fits together, right? So again, I have my gateways, I have my microservices, I potentially, have my containers, or again, even if we're going old school and doing some on-prem stuff, but how do all of these fit together? How do I see the data coming into the environment? Where's the data coming to? What's actually in use? And we use that then to again help us inform and address some of these challenges, which we'll get to in just 1 second. But just wanted to give you kind of a quick level set in terms of what we do from a security point of view for Dynatrace. But with that, I will hand it off to Mark to talk about what we're actually trying to achieve with applications in AWS.
Okay, thanks, Susan. So let's talk a little bit about the AWS well-architected framework and how that ties to observability. And what we have learned from our customers is customers ask us for some guidelines, for some best practices, because they want to be able to assess whatever they are doing is how AWS would do it. I guess they have some trust that we, since we operate one of the largest stores, that we know the answer to anything. That's not the case. So let me quickly go through the 6, what we call pillars of our well-architected and observability framework. Let's start a little bit in the middle with reliability. Reliability is pretty much, is our application or is our platform doing what it's supposed to do? And what are the processes? What are the best practices? What are the guidelines around it? How can I validate it that the application is available when I need it? On the right side comes the other aspect, which I call performance efficiency. Does my application have the required horsepower or response time? That's a little bit, is the latency okay? Is it acting fast? Is it efficient? Is the MTDR correct? Those aspects come into play here. On the right side, you see a new addition to our pillar framework, sustainability. And sustainability is a little bit, are we getting greener? Are we worrying about the carbon footprint? And the reason I want to mention that is Dynatrace allows you to do some sustainability calculations, so you can check if you are on the right track with your application architecture and framework. Let's talk a little bit about operational excellence. And operational excellence is how fast do I get my idea or application over the development cycles and the CI/CD pipeline into production? Are my teams working efficiently? Are they really doing the right things? What are the key processes I should worry about? What do I need to do to be more efficient? On the right side again, the middle box is cost optimization. Everybody needs to worry about money and really being able to have a good handle that you're right sizing your environment, that it's fast enough to give your customers a good experience, but you are not allocating additional 30, 50% of resources, which you will never know. So cost optimization is all the aspects. What can I do to make my application better available, better perform, and even, I would say, more secure at a low cost point? Which then leads us to the last pillar, which is security. Security pillar and our security, well-architected and observability aspects have been changing a lot. One side is the threat landscape is changing. That means we get more attacks, we get more vulnerabilities. But people, because of what happened with some other vendors out there, are getting much more worried. So the overall attention on security, all the security tools, all the security events, the metrics, the logs, and everything is becoming much more important. And also the response processes, how quickly your team and your organization is able to react to any threats which happen against your environment. Let's go to the next slide and look at it a little bit in a different view. And at AWS, we call that the AWS Cloud modernization journey of our customer. And many of our customers, and I would say it's probably more than 50%, still have a very big on-prem environment. Either they have applications or hardware which needs to run on-prem, or they still didn't have enough time yet to go into the cloud. The first stage, if a customer is migrating to the cloud, is we call that the planning and migration phase. Is we need to understand what are all the local workloads, what you have out there. It's easy on the networking side because you have a pretty good understanding usually. It gets a little bit harder on the server, on the infrastructure side, and it gets even harder on the application and services side. Once you have decided, okay, I have an understanding, the next phase would be migrate. Migrate means the workloads which you think make sense migrating would move to the cloud. And very often a common approach for customer is what we call lift and shift. Lift and shift means you take a virtual machine in your on-prem data center and you just shift it into a virtual machine in the cloud. One of the tools and one of the strengths of Dynatrace is it allows you to do auto discovery of whatever you have available on-prem, and doing the process where you migrate data to the cloud and optimize it in the cloud. Dynatrace also allows you with auto discovery to always keep your inventory, your services, your hardware inventory up to date. So you don't need to worry and you have a very good understanding where you are in your migration steps. So we talked about point one, lift and shift. The next option is cloud managed. If you have migrated your application and you also migrated your database service like SQL, Oracle, or others, you probably might think, how can I better align it? How can I better optimize it? And that's the phase where you will probably change and shift out your self-hosted databases with some of our managed offerings like Amazon RDS, our ECS services, and so on, because you realize you are much more efficient doing what you are good at, developing applications and moving them over, but not necessarily it's a core competency for you to operate those platforms. The next phase, number 3, is to go to cloud native. We provide, I think, about 400 different services in AWS, which can make your life easier and much more efficient. Cloud native also means very often you rethink a little bit what your application needs to do and leverage some of the components which are out there already, which have been proven by hundreds or thousands of customers, and just try to use them. One of the examples here is you use AWS Lambda, our serverless components, to build your applications. So you no longer need to worry about applications, servers, and so on. AWS takes care of that. Once you are at stage 3, then it's more about how are you refactoring, how are you innovating. And the message here is very clear. No longer spend time on doing what you shouldn't worry about, like worrying about security, worrying about servers, worrying about some of the CI/CD processes. Try to use your skills and resources to really innovate and be more flexible and create new customer outcomes. And that summarizes my 2 slides I wanted to share with the team today.
But we will still be talking later as we're going into some of the challenges based on some of your customer experiences through AWS. So I think that, as we kind of go through here, so here's kind of the lay of the land. We kind of started with what Dynatrace, brings, this whole runtime view, observability. This is what AWS, who, to be fair, they've kind of been in the business for a while. So I think they have some good ideas in terms of, best practices and whatnot. But even with all of these resources, we're still looking at some of the challenges today. So again, I've been in this space a long time. I think Mark, when we were getting ready for the webinar, he's been in, the space for a long time. And, things are getting more complex, they're getting faster, they're getting more challenging. So again, we surveyed our own customers here at Dynatrace, kind of just to lay the ground of kind of what we're trying to address. If we're talking about security, we have all these tools. We have the 400 services that I'm trying to monitor, that Mark mentioned that AWS is providing to speed this innovation. But it's gotten 68% of our customers are saying it's gotten way, way, way harder, right? More because of this complexity. So while we're providing services to fund this or to make sure this innovation happens at the speed the business requires, that provides some real challenges from a security point of view. Or even though I've been, talking and listening about DevOps and DevSecOps and the promise of automation, we're still asking our development teams to spend, up to 11 hours per week per developer doing things like looking at spreadsheets, trying to figure out, first of all, again, we're focusing on security, where that vulnerability is. Is it relevant to them? Are they actually using that component? Who owns that piece, right? To make sure that, it gets routed correctly. Or, things aren't tested correctly. Again, we've been doing pipelines for a long time, but there's still concerns about, the coverage of the test, especially from a security point of view. So obviously, we haven't quite cracked the challenge yet. If we're still hearing these types of things from our CISOs, right, in our larger organization. So why is that? And specifically to cloud native, what are some of the challenges? And I think Mark actually, touched upon some of these as he was kind of going through, what does a well-architected application look like? And, what's the journey, right? The modernization journey, from lift and shift all the way up to a re-architecting or a rationalization to take advantage of some of these cool services that AWS provides. The first thing that popped out to me as he was talking was this 400 services. So everything from Lambdas to RDS, to API gateways to, I don't even know all of them. I think there's a new one, I feel like, every month or two. So we have this increased complexity, which is good from an innovation and not having to worry about, I don't know how to, I'm not an operations person, so maybe I don't know the best way to do a container, or I don't want to have to manage, what the sizing is. That's all good from a agility point of view. But, again, now I have this complexity. Now I have decreased visibility, maybe of how all those things fit together, as we go along in our cloud native journey. So again, that's a challenge, both from an observability point of view, as well as a security point of view. And it just gets worse, right? The longer or the more in depth we are into that cloud native journey. I know we like to think yes, please. I'm so sorry. Please go ahead.
On my side. So something I learned the hard way is the earlier you start to understand what observability really means, even if you start with a very easy platform, the better will be the outcome. Because at a given moment, you have so many interconnected systems, which, as the slide says, decrease visibility. It will be very difficult in the case of an event, and we don't hope you get a vulnerability or a breach event, to really understand which systems are impacted and what the best mitigation steps will be. But I think Susan will cover that probably in the second block now.
No, that's great. And again, that's great. I think to your point, we throw around this term observability. Well, what the heck does that mean, right? People, everything from what is my CPU doing, or memory, very kind of quote unquote basic, to, okay, again, what's this complex end to end? I know every aspect of something that's widely distributed. So to your point, I think the more information you have on that, the better, but it becomes more difficult, right? When it's not something I can just quickly log in, or it's not something that I'm managing. So I think that's great. perspective from you. And then I guess relying on manual processes, I feel like we've been talking about automation for at least, let's say 15 to 20 years, right? Depending on, what layer of automation we're talking about. But it still is shocking to me how many customers I talk to, and they have very manual processes. Email is an automation for them, but, we're talking about, I call somebody up, I potentially Slack or Teams somebody, I'm working with spreadsheets. So again, when everything is so manually, first of all, I think that's very error prone. It's also very time intensive. There's a lot of know-how that you need to know to be able to do that effectively. So again, as we're moving into these kind of cloud native where things are more abstracted and more autonomous, the reliance on manual processes becomes more of a challenge. And again, Mark, I don't know if that's something that you see in your customer base or if you have something different to add to that.
Yeah, so if I talk to customers, initially when they start the cloud journey, it's like, oh, we are happy to find our way around the AWS console and create all the services we are required to have. A more mature customer will say, okay, we have created now our own CloudFormation template, and we can automate some elements in it. And if you look on the right side of the most mature customers, infrastructure as code, and using tools like CloudFormation, Terraform, or tools like Polumni and others is really the way forward. If you ask them why, they say, well, we can make sure it's always the same. We can make sure that we disconnect the physical body from an automation. That means we know it's always done the same way. It's done by an automated tool, and I don't need to worry that too many people have access. And the third element is we can very easily implement this in our CI/CD pipeline. So we can have proper processes like review, approval, deployment, publishing. And we will definitely be covering that a little bit later, but we can also then tie Dynatrace into those processes to make automation and security the standard. Back to you, Susan.
Yes. Yeah, and I think, as you were kind of talking about IAC and Terraform and, everything as code, security as code, infrastructure, everything, right, as code. I think while that's to your point, that's what we're seeing very mature customers doing, or organizations, I guess I should be more accurate. It provides its own challenge because now, again, we're asking for people to understand, well, what should my Terraform look like? And what should that IAC, or what should my Kubernetes, YAML file look like? So again, it's amazing that we can have that kind of foundation to be able to, then automate and, everything is the same every time, and, leverage potentially the expertise that I have within the organization. However, that expertise isn't always there as the change, right? New services, new changes in Kubernetes, new, right? And you have to keep up to speed on that as, things become more hybrid, I guess is probably a good way to say that, right? There's not these clear delineations of this is code, this is infrastructure, this is security. It's kind of all a mishmash at this point.
So maybe, Susan, let me take the third box here, siloed tool and processes, because that's one I have to talk very often about in the security context. And the challenge for businesses is you want to have visibility in your security, and as Susan mentioned, observability data. That means that's logs, that's metrics, that's events. And very often companies have the challenge that you have different teams, like you have your server team, you have your networking team, you have your different application teams, your platform teams, and so on. So it's very hard to understand how you can collect this information and what you need to do. So at AWS, we have recently, I think last year, announced a new service which is called Amazon Security Lake. And Amazon Security Lake is your single place where all security log files will be stored from all your AWS accounts, from all your regions, from all your applications and systems. So that's, as an example, a way how we try to make your architecture better and easier to understand. We also have what I call the magic button, meaning that once you have defined your policy, you can say from now on, please collect the data from all the systems and all new accounts automatically. That will help make that whole process more seamless. Back to you, Susan.
Yes, I think that's the goal, right? That's the goal. Again, you had the modernization journey. There's this modernization or this journey, right, to break down the silos. And again, I think, when I look at some of what we're doing here at Dynatrace, breaking down that silos by having, like you were talking about, the AWS Security Lake. Well, I look at Dynatrace in a similar way, right? Is that having a common platform for various stakeholders, right, to be able to collaborate on. But, so great, these are kind of some high level, we talked about some of the high level challenges. All right, so let's get down to maybe the individual teams, right? Like what do we hear from them? What do we see when we talk to organizations, who are on this, this journey, right? Wherever they're at in the journey, starting or, well along their way. So probably the two things that I hear the most is, holy cow, Batman, where do I start? Again, whatever my tool or my platform of choice is, I'm getting overloaded with alerts, findings, again, however you're being consuming that. And then the second one is, I don't know who owns these. And again, it seems very simplistic to say that. Well, how do you not know who owns a specific component? Again, code, infrastructure, configuration, what have you. But again, when we're looking into some of these larger organizations, again, who knows? Again, widely distributed. You have teams rolling on, rolling off. You have contractors in place. You have something that maybe has been around for, 20 years, you're migrating that to the cloud. So again, these become at scale, big challenges, especially as we move into cloud. The other thing that I hear a lot is, and again, even internally here at Dynatrace, is that a lot of these enablers that we use as part of a cloud native application were not really designed for security in the first place. They were designed to speed innovation, to allow businesses, to achieve those business outcomes that Mark was talking about earlier. So being able to use those components to develop quickly, to be competitive, to reduce costs, whatever the business outcome they were trying to achieve with. Security was kind of an afterthought, as it is a lot, to be honest. So we're kind of backdooring into this. So it's this like new technologies, potentially very complex. They're not really designed out of the box for security. So you have to know, oh, don't forget to turn off that Kubernetes thing or the container thing to run as root. Now that's a very simple thing. We know this at this point, but why was that not out of the box a configuration? So those types of things, I think, really end up kind of biting us a little bit, as we go into kind of this cloud native approach, this cloud first mentality and having to now worry about security almost as an afterthought. So again, Mark, I don't know if there's something that you hear from your customer around some of these blockers in your discussions.
Yeah. So the way I would approach it is we need to start thinking about integrating security into the deployment processes directly. And if I look a little bit how AWS does things, security is our top priority, and we came to the conclusion that the more we isolate end users from system activities, the higher the security is we can guarantee. And what that pretty much means is a lot of people working at AWS no longer have system access at all because it's simply not needed. We were able to isolate it that much that the systems are running. Our observability platform and security platforms give us the information we are needed. And really, each time we deploy a new service, one of the first questions we ask ourselves is, how can we build it secure? How can we make it secure? And how can we make sure it stays secure? Back to you, Susan.
I feel like we need to be passing the mic or something like that. And I agree, but and I think that I see there's a question about the right way, and I think that has been an evolution of kind of this idea of least privilege, locking things down, and that's kind of been an offshoot or a consequence, if you will, of kind of where we started, right? With everything being wide open, and we learned, right? But it continues to be a challenge. And then I guess the other one, just to round out all the boxes, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but things just change so fast. There's always a new service that you need to learn, or there's a new popular language, or there's a new version of something. So again, just keeping up to date, and then specifically your security toolings in general need to support whatever the latest, greatest whiz bang object might be. So again, all things that potentially were there already outside of cloud native specifically, but the acceleration, the risk, right, has just gotten that much more as we move to the cloud. So all good challenges. We're never going to the cloud. Let's just bring it all back home, lock it in our data centers. No, that is not the right answer. So how do we solve that? So again, Dynatrace, as part of this, observability with security, offering, supporting cloud native applications in AWS. We look at the view of the world, again, everything at runtime. So as we have Dynatrace as part of our cloud applications, we're constantly monitoring, whether we're talking about, again, resiliency, performance, availability, or security. So really being able to detect vulnerabilities in that running code in the context of the environment. So again, I have this vulnerability, it's located in this, bit of running code and this microservice. This microservice is talking to this, backend database, or we're seeing like traffic, coming in from these various places. We're able to then detect where that vulnerability is, always on, always monitoring, but then say, again, what is the prioritization or what is the severity of that vulnerability based on the environmental context that Dynatrace can see. So all of that is automated, all of that is automatic. And then as we move from kind of maybe the detection into the remediation or the mitigation phase, we want to make sure that we're safe. Now, AWS has a lot of amazing security capability in terms of making you safe or your application safe from, breaches and data exfiltration and whatnot. So Dynatrace brings to the table an additional layer at the application layer. So it somehow, a malicious user gets in, circumvents because they're sneaky, they get in, they get to the application. Dynatrace then has another layer to block that particular malicious user from actually exploiting, some of the vulnerabilities that we've detected in your running application. But because the business is important and, these applications exist for a reason, a business reason, we leave the application up and, it's still performance and all those good things. Again, remediation is great. We always want to fix things, but, going back to some of the challenges that we talk about, like how do I know where to start? Who owns this? I don't know what to do, right? Because again, we're asking our development teams to constantly do more and more and more. They're not security experts. So again, what we're bringing to the table is in an automatic way, I'm going to send the ticket to the right team, right? So we have an example here in just a second of how we kind of do this better together story internally at Dynatrace, right? So as part of the remediation flow. So, sending a ticket to the right teams, automatically notifying the stakeholders in their tool chain of choice, making sure that, again, I'm not overloaded with this, large list of vulnerabilities and getting to, here's my top 10 or my top 5 or my top 2, as the case may be. And then finally, intelligently investigating, kind of finding the unknown. So everything is good, but things still happen. So, again, Dynatrace being an observability platform, we see some sort of anomaly, not quite sure what it is. Maybe it's a misconfiguration, everything is code. We make mistakes. So maybe it's a misconfiguration. Maybe it's a performance problem masquerading. Maybe it's a security problem masquerading as a performance problem. We just don't know at this point, but we want to be able to investigate intelligently, quickly, the data that we're gathering from AWS, from Dynatrace, to be able to understand, what's really happening, right? And do this in kind of a repeatable, shareable sort of way.
Yeah. So Susan, maybe if I may comment. So the way I usually see it, you have 3 levels. You have the logging level where you get all the log files. You have the infrastructure level. The infrastructure level is the next level up. And then you have the application level. And all those together define a service. So what you want to really be able to do is you quickly want to identify, is it an application issue? Is it an infrastructure issue? Or where does the problem come from? And Dynatrace gives you all the tools required to faster pinpoint the source of the problem. You don't want to be called in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and have to really do a lot of digging around to identify the source. You really want to have a good entry point which guides you to problem resolution. Back to you, Susan.
I don't know. I love being called at 3 a.m. I don't know what kind of life you live, but I'm just teasing. Everybody loves those, those text messages, WhatsApp, whatever, at 3 a.m. with a problem. But yes, that's absolutely, and I think that's part of the challenge, again, with this complexity of the systems, right, is first of all, I have all this data, where in the world do I start? And I need to be able to do that quickly, whatever layer. So again, kind of a real life example of, the better together, how do we intelligently do security for cloud native applications? Again, Dynatrace, big customer or user of AWS services. Our own platform uses a lot of cloud native components. So we use AWS Security Hub with the CloudWatch. And what was happening is that CloudWatch is great, but we were just getting overloaded with results, thousands potentially a day. So it was very time consuming to have to go through those. Are they, what are they? And if it's relevant, where do they go, right, to be handled? And then there's also, I think, the challenge that we sometimes don't talk about is it's not just about the time. It's just, if you're pinging me all the time, I'm going to stop answering. I'm just going to ignore you. That's not what we want from a security point of view. So what we've done is that we're taking that data from AWS, we're merging it in with our data. So again, that's kind of the Grail. That's Dynatrace's data lake. We're then making sense of that. So we're doing the analysis within Dynatrace, and then we're automating the ticket creation. So again, we're automatically getting this data in through a workflow. We're automatically doing the analysis, and then we're automatically creating these JIRA tickets, since that's what we use internally. So we go from thousands potentially of alerts a day down to maybe a couple of tickets, right, that go to the right people. So that allows us to achieve security outcomes, because the likelihood that they're going to be worked on is now obviously much higher, right? I'm not annoying people to death with, a lot of alerts. It's also going to the right team automatically. So again, I don't have to hunt, who owns this? I'm not really sure. Let me maybe potentially go into my service catalog, or, Slack a friend, which is my preferred method to find anything. We've automated this whole process, so we're able to streamline the prioritization all the way through to the remediation. So that was a real world example from us internally of how we would intelligently address cloud native security with AWS. And then the other example of, and again, this is investigating the unknown. So again, I get that alert at 3 a.m. because that's when it always happens. I now need to understand what happened. So again, I'm bringing in the various logs from AWS, like my core DNS, my routing, and I'm able to see, again, is this a misconfiguration? Is there just maybe something, legitimate going on, but it triggered the anomaly because, again, it's outside of an automatic benchmark that Dynatrace has done. But basically, I'm able, with this tree that you kind of see here, I'm able to keep track of, where was I? What was my thought process as I'm kind of going through this investigation? So again, I don't lose time. I can save data off, so I can then report people. I can hand this off to Mark because I'm at 3 a.m. I'm tired. I need to go to bed. He's on shift. But again, the idea is to be able to understand in those various layers that Mark was talking about, what's actually going on. And once I know that, then of course I can go to a course of action, automated or otherwise, right? Depending on what it would be. So again, Mark, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
No, I think you covered the main points. As you said, AWS has a lot of tooling which can help developers and operators and others to make the journey easier. We have a very good integration with Dynatrace. So Dynatrace can link to most of those tools to give you that consolidated view, which will make your life easier. Back to you, Susan.
Thanks, Mark. All right, and then I guess just the one thing that I wanted to add is stay tuned. I guess Dynatrace is looking. We will be expanding our cloud native security application capability. So again, we made an announcement a couple months ago, or a month ago, I guess time has flied, around Rootcast. So again, that's going to give us a lot more capability in terms of the security and compliance, always with AWS. Again, we see ourselves as being, a strong partner with AWS. They have a lot of great things that we're able to take advantage of, and vice versa. So again, nothing that would preclude that. All right, so I think with that, so some of the key takeaways: unified observability and security is absolutely 100% necessary when we're looking to automate, to break down silos, to get that really holistic view as we move to the cloud. Certainly, we would like to get proactive. So I know we've talked a lot about the challenges just in general, but ideally where we want to move to as part of a maturity model, or a maturity model journey, is that, we want to get to the point where we're checking for these things, prior to, something actually getting out there and open to everybody. And then automate. There's way too many manual processes out there. So always be looking for places that we can automate, something that's repeatable, something that is known, right? It's understood, like I have this, then that sort of thing. And I think that's where we really start to get value out of, again, cloud native applications, when it's not just the applications themselves are potentially automated, but all of the things around that. So again, troubleshooting problems, security, of course, as well. All of the things that make a well-architected application well-architected, outside of just, I have a pipeline and, it does its thing. All right, so I think with that, we are going into the Q&A, and I'll pass it off to Cody, but it looks like we have some really good questions posted.
We do so, Susan. We've received a lot of questions, and luckily you guys have actually already answered quite a lot of them just over the course of clarifying with us. So thank you so much for doing that. We'll go ahead and take a look at a couple questions that I know Mark responded directly to the attendees, but we'll go ahead and capture them in our recording here. So how does Dynatrace mitigate observability in a multi-cloud environment and with serverless?
So I'll let Mark answer that, since he answered that in the chat. I'll let him answer it live and on the recording.
Yeah, so the way Dynatrace does it is we connect to multiple cloud platforms at the same time, like to Azure and AWS. And then we provide a single glass of pane. That means you get one observability view across both platforms to make it easier to find weaknesses or issues. Anything to add, Susan?
No, I think that's good. So again, I think there's certainly multiple approaches, but fundamentally, like Mark said, we're part of your AWS environment. We're connecting. Again, there's always more than one way to do that, I guess. But we're basically connecting to that AWS environment and then bringing that data into Dynatrace, again, whether that's serverless, whether that's EC2, EKS, whatever the case may be, to provide that or Azure AKS, I guess, as the case may be, and to bring that all into one place. So then I do have that single pane of glass, and I can start to do the analysis and get that visibility.
Perfect. So our next question is on the topic of AI, but do we get AI automated priority suggestions for identifications? And if yes, what is the accuracy level?
I'm guessing this one is to me a little bit, so I'll take this one. So yes, so when I was talking about the contextualization of the results, so I guess it's kind of two parts. The first bit, we do leverage the Dynatrace AI to, first of all, look to see everything that we see and make suggestions of where to start. So we recommend that you fix vulnerabilities here because we see a lot of them, or a lot of high or critical or whatever. So that, again, is via our AI. That's automatic. The second place that you'll see it is that even within the context of a vulnerability, based on some of those environmental factors that we see, again, where the vulnerability is in the environment, we will we will potentially lower the severity of that vulnerability. So again, we try to be smart in terms of, not treating everything, not all criticals are criticals, if that makes sense, right? There is a difference based on, how that particular vulnerability is in the running environment. So again, we leverage our AI to help with that prioritization and that contextualization.
All right. And what can you tell me about if we're running a hybrid AWS environment? Would this approach still work?
That would still
Yes.
work. So because Dynatrace can leverage on-prem and multiple AWS environments or multiple cloud environments at the same time, this approach would still work and is highly recommended.
Yeah,
And,
I'm a simple yes. That's my ad.
Straightforward. So it looks like we probably got time for about 2 more quick questions. So can security scans be automated as part of SLO verification in pre-production?
So I'll take this one, and then again, Mark, you can add anything. Yes, and in fact, that was kind of like one of the key takeaways is that, again, we want to be proactive. We want to get to, some sort of predictability in terms of security, at least as far as we can, right? That's always kind of the holy grail, as it were. So as part of that, as part of your release validation process, Dynatrace can be part of that. We call them SLIs, but basically checking not only for performance and availability type SLIs, but also security. And I will just add, one of the things I think is unique about what Dynatrace adds to that kind of security gate approach is that we're not just checking to see, do I have any new criticals or I have a total number. I can also start to put SLIs around, again, some of those environment factors that we talked about, right? So I can get a little bit more interesting, I guess, in terms of the SLIs that I put into place. Not a quick answer, sorry about that.
We can't hear you, Cody. Final question.
So and that actually was our final question. So you got off a little bit easier, but I do know we have one final slide to pop up. So we'll go ahead and jump up to that right now. So how do we get started with Dynatrace?
Susan.
So I was going to say, I guess I'll just jump right in. Yeah, so I think that the best way, is through the AWS marketplace. So we do have a 15-day trial, so you can check it out. And again, fully supported through the AWS marketplace. So yeah, that would probably be, that's how I recommend getting started.
All right. Well, before we officially bring things home, do you have any parting words, the two of you? Any thoughts to leave our audience with? Mark?
I would say thank you, everybody, for listening. It was a pleasure speaking together with the Dynatrace team. We shared the well-architected review in the download section, so have a look, investigate, improve, and make something more secure.
I don't think I can add anything to that. That was good. I'm bringing him along to all of my calls. But no, I would just say I would add my own thanks and great questions from everyone who attended, and thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, Susan and Mark, thank you so much for joining us today on Techstrong Learning. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cody.
So to our audience, before I release you, just stick around for one more second. Couple final reminders. We have recorded our session today, and we will be emailing it to you as soon as we possibly can. But you'll also find it living on the DevOps website. That's devops.com/webinars, and it will be in the on-demand section. I'd like to give an additional thanks to everyone who sent in chats and questions today. Those have made you eligible for our $50 Amazon gift card giveaway, but maybe you weren't so involved and you'd still like a chance to enter the drawing. There is a link to our survey at the top of the chat, as well as in the handouts. We would really love to hear your feedback regarding our program today. We're always looking to improve and figure out how we can deliver the best content to you. So thank you so much for attending today. I'd like to thank Dynatrace for sponsoring our program. And with that, I believe we are all set to go. Susan and Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, you may now disconnect.